Tonight, dear listeners, prepare yourselves for a chilling ride through the fog-covered streets, where shadows blur reality and the line between life and death fades into uncertainty. Meet Henry Bennett, a dedicated policeman whose kindness and determination push him beyond the badge, guiding him through lonely nights as a rideshare driver, a man just trying to make ends meet for his family. But tonight, Henry picks up a passenger unlike any other mysterious figure, cloaked by shadows, who carries secrets far darker than the fog enveloping the city streets. Who was this midnight passenger, and what message did he leave behind? Stay tuned, dear listeners, as we journey together through the chilling roads of uncertainty, where truth blurs with the impossible and the line between the living and the dead disappears into the night. Dim your lights, slip beneath your covers, turn up your volume, and let's uncover together the chilling secret behind the midnight passenger.
The night was colder than usual, even for November. Rain splattered against the windshield, mixing with the fog to create a blur that turned the whole city into a hazy, ghost-like place. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and sighed deeply. Truth be told, I was dead tired. Between patrolling the streets during the day as a cop and driving passengers around town at night, exhaustion had become my constant companion. I glanced at the small photo tucked in my sun visor. Sarah smiling, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly, eyes bright despite everything we'd been facing. A knot formed in my chest. Ever since Sarah got pregnant, we'd been ecstatic, ready to face whatever came our way. But life had other plans. Doctors discovered something, a condition with treatments I could barely pronounce, let alone afford. My salary as a police officer only went so far, hence the late nights, chauffeuring strangers around, chasing every extra dollar to keep Sarah safe, healthy, and to give our child a fighting chance. Around midnight, as fatigue threatened to pull me under, my phone buzzed with another notification. Another ride. I felt a brief surge of relief. Each ride meant more money, more hope. Tapping the screen to accept, I followed the GPS toward the outskirts of town. The streets grew quieter, the city lights dimming as I approached a less familiar neighborhood of old estates hidden behind thick groves of trees and swirling fog. I slowed down near the pickup point, my headlights cutting through the mist to reveal a tall figure standing silently beneath the dull glow of a street lamp. He wore a dark coat, collar upturned against the chill, and a wide-brimmed hat obscuring most of his face. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I pulled over beside him. But I shook it off. Stress and exhaustion, nothing more. The passenger side door opened, a cold gust swirling inside. He slid into the seat gracefully and shut the door softly. "Good evening," I said, attempting friendliness despite the odd tension in the air. The man nodded slowly, the brim of his hat still casting shadows over his eyes. "Good evening," he responded. His voice low, smooth, yet strangely hollow. I glanced at the GPS. His destination was a good 20-minute drive away, tucked into the secluded hills outside of town. Expensive real estate, where folks lived quietly, tucked behind closed doors and high fences. As we rode in silence, I kept catching glimpses of him in my rearview mirror. A blurred silhouette, mysterious and unsettling. His silence made every minute drag by, amplifying my unease. "Long night, huh?" I finally asked, trying to break the oppressive quiet. "Longer than you could possibly know," he murmured cryptically. The words hung between us, heavy and unsettling. We reached a sprawling mansion at the top of a hill, its imposing silhouette barely visible through the dense fog. Ancient, towering trees loomed over the property, branches grasping at the shadows. I parked near the front gate and waited for him to exit. But he paused. "I have a small favor to ask," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Could you wait here for a few minutes? I need to deliver this package personally, but it won't take long." He held up a small box, carefully wrapped in dark paper. Something about it felt odd, but I quickly dismissed my hesitation. Money was tight, and each moment spent in this car was crucial for Sarah and our baby. "You don't have to worry," he added quietly, as if sensing my unease. "I'll make it worth your while. You'll receive full payment for your time plus a generous tip. Trust me, you won't regret this." I swallowed hard, glancing toward the house, then back to him. The thought of extra money we desperately needed silenced my inner warnings. "Sure," I replied, forcing a confident tone. "I'll wait right here." He nodded gratefully and stepped out of the car, his figure swiftly blending into the fog as he moved toward the mansion. Alone now, I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned on the radio quietly, hoping the music would ease the tension. But instead, static filled the car, a distorted hum echoing softly. I leaned back in my seat, eyes scanning the swirling fog, trying not to think too much about the eerie quiet or the growing uncertainty gnawing at me. The minutes dragged on painfully. I checked my phone. No messages, no updates. The fog thickened outside, swallowing up even the faint outlines of trees and fences, isolating me completely in an ocean of gray. "Just a few minutes," I whispered to myself, trying to shake off the nerves. "Just a few minutes, and he'll be back." But deep down, I couldn't shake the creeping feeling that something about this night, this passenger, this house was terribly wrong. I stayed there, engine idling softly as the mist wrapped tighter around the car, waiting for the stranger to return. unaware that this seemingly routine ride was about to unravel into something I would never forget. I tapped my fingers nervously against the steering wheel, staring at the mansion through the mist-covered windshield. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked the clock again. Now 15 minutes had gone by, and there was no sign of my passenger. What could he possibly be doing in there? I glanced at my phone again, reopening the ride app. His profile stared back at me, but something felt off. The picture displayed showed a younger, brighter-looking version of the man I had just driven with, a healthy complexion, smiling eyes, someone clearly full of life. But the man who'd gotten into my car had a shadowy, almost lifeless demeanor that unsettled me. It was as if I'd picked up a ghost of whoever this person once was. I exhaled sharply, trying to shake off the nerves. Maybe it was just stress getting to me. Between my job on the force, Sarah's treatments, and these exhausting night shifts, my imagination was working overtime. Still, something gnawed at my gut. An instinct that I'd learned never to ignore. Instinctively, I reached under my seat, fingers brushing against cold steel. My police-issued pistol rested comfortably in its concealed compartment. Sliding it out, I checked quickly to ensure it was loaded. I hated feeling that I needed it, especially on a routine rideshare job, but these days you never knew. My heart eased slightly at the familiar weight of the weapon, but it was brief. A fleeting comfort. Another 5 minutes ticked by. This was ridiculous. My passenger had promised it would only take a moment, yet here I was, parked outside an eerie mansion, swallowed up by the thickening fog. I stepped out of the car, breathing deeply to steady my nerves, and debated heading toward the house to check on him. It was a cop's instinct to protect, to investigate, yet before I could take a single step, I spotted him emerging from the swirling mist. The figure walked slowly back toward the car, head bowed slightly. His movements seemed strange, almost mechanical, like someone going through the motions without truly being present. Unease rippled through me again as he approached. Without saying a word or acknowledging me, he quietly climbed into the back seat, gently shutting the door behind him. I took one last wary glance toward the mansion, the windows dark and empty, and slipped back into the driver's seat. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the mirror, studying the man. He remained silent, unmoving, staring straight ahead as though lost in deep thought or, worse, in some otherworldly trance. Clearing my throat to break the silence, I forced my voice steady, masking the tremble that threatened to surface. "So, what's our next destination?" He slowly lifted his head, and though I couldn't clearly see his eyes beneath the shadowed brim of his hat, I felt a sudden chill sweep over me as he spoke. "The address is in your app," he murmured softly, his voice eerily calm. "It won't take us long to get there." I glanced quickly at my screen, heart thudding uncomfortably in my chest. Sure enough, a new destination had appeared, marked simply by coordinates, somewhere on the far outskirts of town, isolated from the city and oddly unfamiliar to me. I hesitated for a moment, a part of me wary, sensing something wasn't right. But I couldn't afford hesitation. The bills, Sarah, our child, I needed this money. Needed this to be a routine job. So I gripped the steering wheel tighter, nodding more to myself than to him. "All right, let's go then." As I drove away from that mansion, heading deeper into the fog, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I'd crossed a point of no return. And as the shadows danced through the thickening mist around us, it felt as if every mile brought me closer, not to answers, but to something darker. Something I might not be ready to face. I sat there in my car, staring into the dense fog. The guy had vanished somewhere beyond the cemetery gates, swallowed up completely by the night. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get the hell out of there, but something deeper. A curiosity, maybe, or just plain stubbornness, held me firmly in place. "Damn it," I whispered under my breath, reaching for my gun again. It felt cold and reassuring in my grip. Without really thinking it through, I opened the door and stepped outside. My heart immediately started racing. It felt stupid, I knew that. But I couldn't leave without knowing just what the hell was going on. This wasn't about money anymore. It was personal. Something I couldn't shake. I took slow, cautious steps toward the rusted iron gates. The fog hung low, swirling around my ankles, wrapping me in a cold embrace that seemed to grow tighter with every step I took. My eyes darted everywhere, struggling to pierce through the darkness. I barely made it past the gates when I heard a voice, clear yet strangely distant, echoing gently through the mist. "Come here, Henry. I promised you a tip." A chill went straight through my bones. I tightened my grip on the gun and squinted into the haze, desperate to catch even a glimpse of the passenger. But there was nothing. Just a faint outline of gravestones scattered across the grass, standing like silent guardians of whatever secrets lay buried there. "Hey, show yourself!" I called out, my voice shaky despite my best effort. Silence answered back, cold and mocking. I moved deeper into the cemetery, my breath quickening, nerves fraying with each step. My shoes sunk slightly into the wet ground, and my heart hammered as I moved past shadowy gravestones, my gaze sweeping nervously around me. Then, suddenly, I saw something. A solitary grave stood apart from the others, illuminated faintly by the moonlight filtering through the thick clouds. There, set in the marble, was a photo of the exact face of the man I had just driven here. The world tilted beneath me, spinning wildly out of control. I took a shaky step forward, barely believing what I was seeing. But it was true. There was his name etched into the stone, alongside a date. He'd died exactly 5 years ago tonight. A wave of nausea hit me, forcing me to lean heavily against a nearby gravestone. As I steadied myself, something else caught my attention. An envelope lay propped against the base of his tombstone, untouched by the moisture that clung to everything else around it. My hand trembling, I reached down and picked it up, tearing it open. Inside was cash crisp bills totaling exactly $2,000. My throat tightened. What the hell is this? Days went by, but sleep didn't come easily. I couldn't get that night out of my head. The money was real. I counted and recounted it, each time hoping I'd wake up from this nightmare, but every morning the cash sat there mocking me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. I had to find out exactly who that man was and why he chose me for this twisted encounter. I drove back to the house on the hill in broad daylight this time, though even sunshine couldn't chase away the chill I felt when I parked outside the mansion. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly at the door, almost hoping no one would answer. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman whose eyes carried a quiet sadness. She looked me over, cautiously at first, but her expression softened as I stammered through my introduction, stumbling awkwardly over my words. I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am. My name is Henry Bennett. I drove someone here the other night. He delivered something, a package, I think, to your house. Look, this might sound crazy, but I just need to understand what happened. The woman's eyes filled with sudden tears. She nodded slowly, opening the door wider and motioning gently for me to enter. Please, she said softly, guiding me into a living room filled with pictures, family portraits, happy moments captured forever behind glass frames. My eyes fell immediately on one photo in particular. The same man I drove, younger, smiling warmly at the woman who now stood quietly crying beside me. That's my husband, Daniel, she said. He died 5 years ago. Exactly 5 years ago that night. I'm sorry, I don't understand, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I saw him. I spoke with him. He left something here. She raised a shaky hand to stop me, tears streaming openly down her cheeks now. I dreamed of him that night, she continued, her voice breaking. It felt so real. He came to me, smiling just like in the old days. He handed me a box of chocolates and told me it was time to move on. That he'd always love me no matter what. My heart dropped. Her gaze drifted to a small box sitting on the coffee table beside us. A half-open box of chocolates with a handwritten note attached. I leaned in closer to read it, my eyes wide in disbelief. I will always love you. I sank slowly onto the edge of her couch, unable to find words, unable to fully comprehend what I'd gotten myself into. She sat beside me, wiping tears from her cheeks and offering me a faint, bittersweet smile. You know, she whispered softly, sometimes love is stronger than death. All I could do was sit there, speechless, a storm of questions whirling in my head. My reality had cracked wide open, leaving me teetering at the edge of the impossible, unsure if I would ever understand what had truly happened on that dark, foggy night. So there I was, feeling like someone had knocked the wind out of me. Tom, my partner, great guy, always quick on the draw, was right outside in the squad car waiting for me. I'd asked him to tag along on this little follow-up visit because, honestly, I needed someone else to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I gave the lady a quiet nod, murmured some awkward thank yous, and practically stumbled out the door. Tom was leaning against the car, arms crossed, giving me that skeptical cop look he perfected years ago. You all right there, Henry? He said, pushing himself off the car, watching me closely. You look like you've just seen a ghost or something. I laughed nervously. He had no idea how close he was. Man, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me, he shrugged, climbing into the passenger seat. Come on, spill it. You've been twitchy ever since we rolled up here. I sighed and slid behind the wheel, slamming the door harder than I intended. My hands were still kind of shaky as I started up the engine, the rumble barely calming my nerves. As I drove away from that creepy mansion, I glanced at Tom. All right, you remember I told you about that weird passenger a couple nights ago? I started, clearing my throat nervously. He raised an eyebrow, half smirking, half concerned. Yeah, the midnight passenger, right? Creepy guy, quiet, disappearing in a cemetery. Exactly, I said, feeling a chill creep up my spine again. Well, turns out that guy's been dead for 5 years. Tom chuckled a bit at first, clearly thinking I was pulling his leg, but the laughter died pretty fast when he saw my face. Wait, you're serious? Like, actually dead? He asked, suddenly sitting straighter, his voice losing that playful edge. Yeah, man, dead. Found his grave. Name, picture, date of death, everything. There was even an envelope with $2,000 cash on his tombstone, like some kind of messed up tip, I said, shaking my head. Still hardly believing the words coming out of my own mouth. Tom was silent for a moment, absorbing what I'd said. He stared out the windshield, eyes narrowed, tapping his fingers against his thigh. Damn, Henry, he finally muttered, looking back at me, eyebrows furrowed. That kind of thing doesn't just happen, man. You're telling me, I said, trying to force a laugh to lighten the mood. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that? Before Tom could answer, the radio crackled to life, breaking our awkward silence. All available units, we got reports of a disturbance, possible break-in at Elm Street and 3rd. Units nearby, please respond immediately. Tom grabbed the radio instinctively. Dispatch, this is Mitchell and Bennett. We're about 5 minutes away. We got it covered. Copy that, Mitchell. Proceed with caution. Tom clipped the radio back on, giving me another sidelong glance. Guess we'll have to finish your ghost story later, huh? I shook my head, half laughing, half groaning. Yeah, guess we will. I flicked the siren on. You know what's bothering me most about all this? I asked Tom suddenly, breaking the tense silence. What's that? That envelope he left $2,000, Tom. $2,000 cash just sitting there on the dude's grave. Why me? Why the hell leave me that money? Tom shook his head slowly, clearly as baffled as I was. Maybe it was some kind of unfinished business, like maybe the guy needed closure or something. Closure? I scoffed nervously. Tom, this ain't some Hallmark movie, man. Stuff like that doesn't happen in real life. But now, hell, I don't even know what's real anymore. Tom shrugged a bit, leaning back, clearly trying to lighten things up. Look, man, weird things happen out there, right? You've been on this job long enough to know that. Maybe you were just, I don't know, the right guy at the wrong time or something. I nodded, taking a slow breath, gripping the wheel tighter. Yeah, maybe you're right. but it doesn't feel right." He reached over and gave my shoulder a reassuring pat. "Hey, we'll figure it out, okay? Let's just handle this call first, then we'll figure out your spooky rideshare guy." I nodded slowly, trying to let it go for the moment, but deep inside I knew I couldn't. The guy's sad eyes, the look on his widow's face, that envelope of cash, it had all twisted itself inside me somehow. But hey, duty calls, right? I tightened my grip on the wheel and pushed harder on the gas, racing toward whatever trouble awaited us on Elm Street.
Henry Bennett never found a logical or rational explanation for the unsettling events he experienced on that foggy November night. The encounter remained etched deeply into his memory, like an eerie whisper that never truly fades. Although he tried to rationalize it as stress, exhaustion, or perhaps his imagination playing cruel tricks, deep down he knew that something beyond the realm of explanation had touched his life. He chose to keep the entire incident a guarded secret, sharing it only with his wife, Sarah, who listened quietly but never truly understood. Henry knew his fellow officers would dismiss it immediately, perhaps even question his judgment. So he carried the burden silently, letting the story linger only in the quiet moments before sleep. From that night onward, Henry found himself reluctant to patrol alone after midnight, especially near that old cemetery and the isolated mansion atop the hill. Even in daylight, the memory sent shivers down his spine whenever he drove past. And in those rare moments when he found himself alone, navigating dark roads in the early hours of the morning, he couldn't help but glance nervously into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that mysterious passenger staring back at him through shadowed eyes. Or perhaps something even more sinister, lurking quietly behind. Perhaps, dear listeners, some mysteries are better left unexplained. Reminders that there is still much we do not and perhaps cannot fully understand. And now I turn to you. Would you like to hear more spine-chilling tales like Henry Bennett's mysterious midnight ride? If tonight's story intrigued you, let me recommend our latest video on the channel, The Ghost, a High School Legend. It's a haunting narrative about a teenage girl whose life takes a terrifying turn when she encounters the legendary ghost that haunts her school's corridors. Simply click the video appearing on your screen now, and I'll be waiting for you there, ready to share another journey into the unknown. Until next time, dear listeners, stay curious, stay brave, and most importantly, stay safe. Bye.